Well, welcome back to Ye Olde Foundry, ladies and gentlemen. Sand Rammer here, aka Tom Kitchen. What I've got now, I got a couple of these to make. There's a couple of the guys, yeah, they're both guys. The guys that do ramming up, they don't have any wrappers, any wrapping tools like this. I made this as a copy of what somebody had made in the machine shop for the foundry. I think it was on the USS Sierra, which is another, all of my ships are decommissioned. One of them is sitting in the bottom of the ocean off the Virginia coast. My last ship, the Yosemite. Anyway, these come in handy, when you're trying to use patterns and you have loose patterns or even patterns on board, that you can use this end. Let's say this is the I'm trying to wrap it. If it's a tiny little thing or a delicate thing, you use this a little bit. You wouldn't be putting near as much power on the wrapping stroke as you would this. And this is especially important for loose patterns. When you don't have one on a board like this, you just have it, like if I just had this sitting out here and then I rammed it all up and turned it over, I would take the draw spike, whatever spike you might be using, and punch a little indentation there and then wrap it. What you're doing when you're wrapping, R-A-P-P-I-N-G, wrapping, is you're trying to make a nice little bit of clearance all the way around the pattern and the inside of the green sand cores, which is what that is, and the gating system, and so that you can easily pick it up. Now, the good news about this type of pattern is that almost everything, if anything sticks, and I ruin an edge of, let's say, this green sand core around here or the like, no big deal. I just cut it off here when it's done being made, and then I take a file or a precision grinder and just zip off the excess material, and you still are going to have something that looks just like this. Okay, so but it would be a lot nicer if this would get pulled out of the sand and everything being nice and solid. Okay. Okay, there's that. Now, don't forget, this is a stack flask, made out of wood, but it's a stack flask where I can have several of these stacked on top of each other and pour them all in one pour, and I would have multiple amounts of this casting. Plus, you probably see this. I've taken advantage of the fact that this looks a lot like an ingate, so I didn't make any ingates here other than the casting itself. Once the metal flows all the way to the end and backs up, and hydraulic pressure backs it up into the here, well, all I got to do after this is all solidified is just cut it off at the runner, and now I got my wrapping tool. So, piece of cake. All right, so pardon me. Let's see if after I dust this so that none of the sand sticks to anything in there, I'm going to see if this is, yeah, it's up a little bit. Okay, so let's put it down some. I don't necessarily want you to watch me as much as watching what's going on here. Okay, so it's dusted. I'll get the facing sand. You're not going to have to ram much sand because of the thickness of this flask, which makes everything that much faster. As, for instance, I could go ahead and all of the sand that I'm going to be putting into this flask, I could put through the riddle. It wouldn't hurt anything. Kind of a waste of time, because all you really need to do is to make sure that the facing sand is against the pattern itself. Now, if I was just to, you know, just start ramming just as we are right now, some of this sand would be squeezed through the crack in this way and lifting this up a little bit. I want this to be nice and flat. I don't want to have this thing lifting up. So, to keep it from lifting up, I'm going to put a couple of these clamps on it. Just to hold this in place, nice and solid against the matchboard. If I let this rise up, you're inviting a run out, because your faces of sand that you're going to have touching each other, one of them is going to have gap in it. Even if it's only just the thickness of a paper, that metal, if it's hot enough, will flow between the cracks in here. Okay? And also keep them, don't get startled about any sudden noise, because I am using a pneumatic rammer, and the air compressor is going to come on ever so often. Okay, buddy, here you are. Alright, scratch this layer so that it can blend in with the next layer, so nothing will fall down, at least in here. Anyways, as I was saying, some of the guys out there that that I watch that they do ram up and pour metal. I've never seen them use a wrapper, an actual wrapper. What is it? Old Founderman. He has this great big piece of, it looks like solid dowel. Solid rod stock. He uses to wrap his patterns out. And a piece of paint. Okay, now before everything gets all dried out, I'm going to try and get this sand collect the sand up from in here. That's the disadvantage of this kind of sand where it's water based. It will dry out if you're not careful to reclaim it in a quick like manner. Between the last, when I made that molder's plaque, the last time I rammed up and poured something, I made some more sand, couple of 50-pound bags of sand, so that I could make more than just one mold. Better to have several molds to pour, so you don't just waste your fuel. After all, I am going to be melting the entire quantity of aluminum that's solid in the crucible right now, so I might as well use it all up at the same time. Okay, you guys can be there. Cover that up so it doesn't dry out. Now, I don't have any guide pins, so I have to be careful. Now when you're wrapping, what you're doing is you're trying to move the pattern back and forth, and give yourself a bit of a gap all the way around, so that when you lift it up, especially with something there is no guide pins for, you're at the mercy of the clumsiness of your own hands. So go 360 degrees around. Okay, now that should have given me at least some gap. The thing is, if I go too far in any direction, I might shear off some of the sand, and when I lift it up, it all, you know, is broken. So what I do is I take the wrapper and I hit it down so that it might be just like in my hand. If I saw a piece out there, I put it back in place and try and pat it back in place so that it glues or bonds with the rest of the sand. Well, the same thing happens when you're getting ready to pull one of these. You got to tap it all the way around. Now, I already made one of these off camera. I'm letting you watch this one now. This is a mark I made. That's where the splash basin is going to be on the other side. Now, let's see. Yeah. That's not the way it all should come out. But here's the reason why, is because I don't have near as much draft as I should have. But as you can see, I still have the basic form. Despite, come on out of there, I see you. Anyway, despite the fact that it looks like this, I can, these chunks out here, that represents extra material that's going to be on there. Not like it's taking away from that form or from these forms. It's just more grinding I got to do. Okay. Now, seeing as how this is the second one, the base, the first one, which is going to be the base, is over there on the bench. Over there on the bench. Letting it dry out. This one, the difference is I've got to make a sprue hole. That's not very much sand there. Come on, you bum. Now what I do have to do, I do have to get rid of the excess sand in the sprue hole. Okay. I don't necessarily want a whole lot of excess sand being pushed around inside my gating system. Too big. So any sand that looks like it could be dislodged in this area, I need to smooth it out and not allow any of that to stay in the mold cavity. All right, kitchen, what'd you do with it? Here I'm getting drifty again. Now what I'm going to do is lay this down and let it dry out over on the bench, trying to take advantage of the fact that this is Western bentonite and its dry strength is better than Southern bentonite, which green strength, Southern bentonite has better green strength. Okay, that's 2 of those. Oh yeah, almost messed up. I've got to make a top portion too. Don't need this right now. Okie dokie. No, that's not good. Don't want that. Now, even if I don't have a pattern, I still dust the bottom board, or this is a molding board really, because it's not going to be sitting at the bottom of the stack. So it's more of a molding board where you might have a loose pattern sitting on it. Well, I don't know about you, but that's irritating. Things moving around. Now I'm happy to say that I did buy another accessory for my camera. Nothing fancy or anything, it's just a clamp with a articulating arm on it so that you can change its, you know, attitude and altitude and aiming point at, you know, whichever way you want. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've seen the clamp. But the clamp is allowing me to have you there watching this, like somebody might be watching on the other side of the molding bench as I work. I believe that it's more helpful to have that. Because if I had a tripod, I'd be constantly bumping against it in order for me to try and get your view as close as possible. I'd be bumping into it all the time. Thankfully, now you got a straight shot down. Alrighty then. Now, one thing I neglected to do to make a mark where the splash basin is going to be. Okay. Okay, venting this too. See, for any of you who are new to this and you didn't see the previous videos first, this is important. Letting these holes in here is important because when the molten metal hits this sand, including the mold cavities over there, it'll develop water vapor very quickly, in fact. Okay, and so the water vapor's got to go somewhere. If this is rammed pretty tight, it might just be trapped inside your mold cavity, making a giant indentation in your casting, and well, you just have to do everything over again. That'll be a casting defect. Okay, if you didn't give the gases and the water vapors and any other vapors that might be part of your mold cavity to escape from. Okay, now this time I'm just going to make a regular pouring basin. There you are. Thankfully, we don't have anything in here to worry about falling out. So what I'm going to do is get rid of all these sharp edges. Just like a machinist will try to get rid of sharp edges that they machined into a piece of metal, I'm going to get rid of sharp edges in here because those sharp edges the sharp edges are made up of sand. And the sand, if you have a sharp edge, well, all you're going to do is break off those pieces of edge, and that'll be floating in the metal or being pushed by the metal. So you just take your leaf end of your double ender, this is called, and you make a nice little basin. And that's plenty big enough for me to pour in. I want to smooth this out too, because don't forget, the metal does have a certain amount of weight to it, whatever you're pouring, and you will it'll drag across this sand. It doesn't just flow across the sand, it drags across the sand as it's being pushed. And if you've got loose sand, it'll drag that up and possibly put it inside your mold cavity, messing up whatever you were trying to make. Now, this molding, this being a molding board, you try and have your molding boards, you know, be left alone and don't be used for anything other than molding. And the reason is this is nice and smooth. If I don't have an example here. This is smooth, it's got a smooth surface, but a nice 3/4 inch bottom board, it might be made of plywood, and the plywood will have formed its grain on the sand. In this case, the back is nice and smooth. Okay, so let me get more of this sand smoothed out, and I'll put this over on the bench, allow it to dry, or dry out, or harden, whichever way you want to say it. Okay, that's one project ready to be poured. Okay, now I've got another one to ram up. If you recognize this from when I made a video about making a ram up block, instead of all the time putting this on the board, putting sand around it, and then cutting down to the parting line, which I made a representative of. You can make this ram up block just one time, and then you can use this to make the parting line, you know, time and time again, as long as you don't hit this with a rammer that has got a steel peen or a steel butt end on it, because this is only plaster of Paris. Okay, so it's tough, but it's not so tough that it can take an impact like that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start gathering up what I need to make this, and I'll bring you right back. One thing I neglected to speak of is that if you're pouring something and it looks as if at the end of its pour you're going to have some trapped gases, like there's no real place for this stuff to go. I mean, I have good confidence that it'll fill that all up, and the permeability, in addition to the vents I put on the other side of this particular cope, rather flask, it's going to let all the gas out that I generate when I pour the metal in here. It runs here, comes in here, and goes all the way to the end there. If you have the sneaky suspicion that that's not going to be good, well, what you can do is you can drag yourself a nice little channel. Okay, put a little channel from there to there, little channel from there to there. See, now here's a place for the gases to come into, if you in fact have any trapped gases. And then at the end of this channel that you've done, use your vent spike, and just give it a little more room. Your metal comes in, it runs along here, stops, backs up, pressure backs up, then it enters here, and then enters here, and then enters there. And now if there's any gases that was going to be a pain, then they'll be pushed into this little channel I made and up the vent hole. Okay, where are you? There you are. Now I want to try and smooth that out a smidgen. And la-di-da, there it is. Okay. Now I have no doubt in my mind that any air or vapors that might be generated and need to be pushed away immediately, there's a place for it to go. Okay. Okay. So, put this back on the bench. Okay, I can put this matchbox, match plate away, put the other match plate, and I can put this hoop on the ground, and I can bring this into play. Okay, now the question you got to ask yourself, do you like it better if it's in this position surrounded by sand, or would you rather have it in this position surrounded by sand? And what I mean by that is, which way would it be easier? If you ram this up in the drag, you're going to be flipping it over, right? So it'll be like that. Okay? And so once you take this away, all right, the end gates will come downhill and then fill this up, right? Problem is, you're going to have a certain amount of sand hanging in the cope. Okay, that will be about that shape, about that much mass of sand in there. Now I'm feeling pretty good that the sand will stick to each other real good, and I might not have to put any kind of mold or anchors in there. So what I'll do, I'll reposition this the way it should be. Okay. Now if your sand isn't strong enough to hold the stuff that's going to be hanging, then ram this up in the cope, and then it'll look like this in the drag when you do it. The hump of sand that this represents will be in the drag. It won't be hanging. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. Now this is going to be the drag. I actually don't really need it to be the other way, because when I was thinking I want to put input or in-gate. I mean, from that camera angle you see, and if I put in-gate, it'll flow, come together, and then fill up, right? Well, the same thing will happen this way. It'll flow, come together, and everything fill up. In addition, the last bit of metal, hot metal, will be here, even after that flows. And so the directional solidification for this casting, well, that'll start here and working its way around to about there. It's a big enough casting, you really don't have to worry about contact area so much. Okay, so put a little bit parting powder, coat everything. Don't want any of the sand to stick. Making the facing sand. This will make it fairly smooth. Okay. Now, if you are wondering what this project is all about, this particular one that I'm working on right now, you can get a better story if you watch the video that I made that showed you how to make these ram-up blocks. Now it seems to me I'm gonna have to make some more bottom boards because, well, this is the first time I made multiple molds here at Ye Old Foundry instead of just making a single mold. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm going to have to turn this sideways. Okay, it didn't move, thankfully. See, that's a bad thing about it. You gotta have your boards on at all times. Otherwise, the possibility exists that you'll have your pattern, especially if it's a loose pattern, fall out while you're maneuvering all this. That's what this is for. Making a gap all the way around so that it's easy to take out. Okay, so now you know that I didn't ram that as hard as well, at least this one spot anyway. I didn't ram it as hard as I wanted to. Okay. There's the pencil. There's the pencil. Now, I want to make the down sprue about here. Then have in-gate, runner, like that. So that's essentially the way that's going to be. So make that mark. Is that about in the middle? Well, not exactly. Yeah, it is. Okay. That's in the middle. I'll remember that. See, now the advantage of using your fingers as mini rammers is that the that incline that I have, this sand that's going to be hanging, again, I'm not going to be able to get all the way to the edges with that rammer because the butt end of the rammer is a bit too big around. So I'm going to have to just do it with my fingers and hope it's strong enough. Okay. Okay, let's see if I can get this sand up and into the bin, my little bin here. Before it dries out. Okay, well, of course the old bad battery bane hit us again. Didn't know when it went out. I was concentrating mostly on this stuff, I guess. Anyway, so I lifted this up and out and nothing fell down, thank goodness. It's always a worry. It's always a worry. If you have stuff hanging in your cope, it's always a worry that it's going to fall. Okay, so now it's a matter of just cutting the ingates and runners and all that stuff. Okay, it's a matter of coming up here. Don't want you to get out yet, buddy. Alrighty. Okay, now don't forget, in order to pressurize your gating system correctly, the end gates have to be a certain depth appropriate for the casting. But whatever the end gates are, the runner's got to be twice as deep, so that the metal will make it all the way to the ends of the runner before hydrostatic pressure pushes it over the edge into the end gates and fills this up. We want it filled up, you know, all over at the same time, instead of just filling this up first and then having this filled up next. We want both of these to flow together at the same time so that the casting will be better, instead of having defects of freezing, casting froze up or something. Okay, now I have the end gates cut. The runner is twice as deep. You may not be able to see it from your position, but it is pretty close to twice as deep as the end gates. Now I've got to make the splash basin, and I think I'm going to take advantage of this. Okay, and that is the splash basin. That will receive the splash of metal from above. If it's twice as deep as the runner, it'll smooth out instead of having always churning metal, which not so bad on aluminum, but pretty bad on anything that's copper based. Okay, let's see here. Here we go. Okay, trying to smooth. What I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to smooth out these pathways so that the molten metal won't tear any sand apart and push the sand inside the cavity. Now this is a very soft brush, because this can be delicate. We might not look it, but it can be delicate. And this will take off the edges without killing everything. Okay. That came out relatively easy. Now it's a matter of getting rid of the edges over here too. The biggest thing is we just want to keep the sand from being ran over by the molten metal and having defects in the casting. Okay, that looks nice and big. Everything looks good. Just time to blow out the sand. Examine a little examination of everything, and it looks like it's going to be okay. Now I'm going to let this dry so that it can get its maximum strength. And when it comes time to like I'm planning tomorrow to pour these. You know, things happen in life though, so I'm not promising tomorrow, but it'll be the next video I'd make. Okay, so yeah, ready. Hope I didn't get a lot of dust, a lot of parting powder on the lens. Okay, we got the drag is ready, cope is ready. For that, these guys are ready to be put together and poured, and so I think I'll unplug this. So I'll go ahead and get this thing edited and uploaded so you can see what's going on now. All right, we'll see you next time. Please pass the word about, you know, the foundry techniques I'm showing everybody, and heck, anybody who wants to make something that they don't have to spend a bunch of bucks for, that's worthwhile in my book. Okay, well, Liberty Call, and I'll see you next vid. Bye bye.